Hello and welcome to Catholic Truth Online. Today we are going to go through the first chapter of the Green Catechism. That is a catechism that we as children actually went through when we were younger, and it's called a Catechism of Catholic Doctrine, approved by the Archbishops and Bishops of Ireland, 1951. So it's a great, concise, smallish catechism book, and we are going to go through hopefully the whole thing, but in separate videos. This one will be the first chapter, and I will be commenting as I go through the chapters. So let's get into it. Part 1, the Creed. Chapter 1, God, His nature and perfections. Who made the world? God made the world. So the Catechism gets right to the point. It doesn't a catechism that's only this size won't begin necessarily with discussing whether or not God exists, and yes, He does, and these are all the reasons because of the unmoved mover and contingency and the uncaused cause and all of the rest of that, which most of the arguments are really found from St. Thomas Aquinas, the ones from reason. But this one assumes that the person is baptized and they've accepted the fact and they have the faith that God exists, and so it just says who made the world, and you're supposed to know that it's God who made the world. Who is God? God is our Father in heaven, the Creator and Lord of all things. Question 2 is emphasizing the fatherhood of God, the creative power of God, which is kind of the fundamental idea of God. It's kind of the one that you think of first of all when you consider God, is that there's this creator who brought everything into existence. And so that's that one. It says next, question 3, why do we call God our Father? We call God our Father because He gave us life and provides for us with fatherly care. So there we go. That's God the Father. Well, we're not necessarily getting into the Holy Trinity yet, but there's quite a different meaning really for God the Father if we're considering Him as the first of the three divine persons. But we call Him a Father in the sense that we are His creatures and He looks after us. So that's that idea of fatherhood that we're stressing in this question. The next one, had God a beginning? No, God had no beginning. He always was and He always will be. He is eternal. So we're starting to get into the perfections of God here. It's saying He's eternal, He always was and He always will be. And you know, it can be quite easy to get the idea of infinite time backwards and infinite time forwards, and He's here now, but that's not how it works. If there was an infinite time doesn't really exist. It's a movement, a measurement of movement, you know, from A to B. But if it was infinite in the past, it would never get to anywhere. It would never make progress, and you know, it raises huge complications. So there can't really be infinite time. There has to be eternity and a certain amount of time. So God is eternal, and that's a perfection that only God has. And then the next one we're going on to is, can God do all things? And the Catechism says that God can do all things and that He is almighty. So we're getting on to another perfection of the Godhead, and this time we're just saying that because He is the infinite being, then He can't be limited by what He can do, because what you do comes from what you are. That is, what you are should determine, in a sense, what you can do. So there's certain things a person can do as a human being, and there's certain things that you can do if you were an angel, and there's certain things that an animal can do. And with God, we can't put a limit on God, so therefore God can do all things, and hence He can produce the universe, for instance. he could do other things as well. Okay, so where is God? God is everywhere, but in a special way he is in heaven, where he is seen by the angels and saints. So we're getting into the omnipresence of God, and really the omnipresence means that God is there by the fact that he holds things in existence, everything without exception. He's also preserving things in existence. Well, yes, he has created things, so he's present in their creation and in their preservation. He is present also by just by the fact that he's God. He has to, we can't really exclude God. So his infinite essence, by his power, by his essence, and those are the two that come to my mind. I mean, there's his essence is such that you couldn't really go to some location and say God isn't here. I mean, so yeah, that's probably enough on that one for now. God is everywhere, and again he's in a special way in heaven, it says, and that's through the beatific vision where he communicates himself, and he's present in the soul in the state of grace, which it doesn't say here, but we'll probably get onto that later on. If God is everywhere, why do we not see him? We do not see God because he is a spirit, and therefore cannot be seen with bodily eyes. Okay, so a spirit is something that cannot be seen by the body quite clearly because it is not a body, and therefore we cannot see God because God is a spirit, and also he would transcend what we could see even with our mind, although in heaven we will certainly have a certain share in an intellectual vision of God, even though it won't be it won't be the way God sees himself, so it's not going to be infinite. We don't see him because he is a spirit, and in fact that's a perfection of God. Some people think God should have a perfect body, and that's a crazy idea. That's putting great limitations on the divine essence. Some people think, well, why deprive him of a body? He's probably got the most perfect body, and they're talking about God. They're not necessarily talking about Christ. Okay, and we know that before Christ came, there was the infinite God, and there is no bodiliness there. And as the divine essence is, there never will be a body that is actually the divinity. So Christ, in his human nature, has a human nature that's added. Well, let's say it's been assumed by the person of the Word, but we won't go too far into that at the moment. Does God see us? God sees us, for nothing is hidden from his all-seeing eye. Again, if God is all-powerful, then therefore nothing can escape his attention. Therefore he sees, in a sense, everything, and he sees us. So that's clear enough. And again, let's not forget that the theologians do try to remind us that all of the perfections of God are not separate things. God isn't made of a whole load of parts. For example, God's existence is not really distinct from his essence. Excuse me. And therefore, in that case, however, with us, we need to express differences because there is logical differences, and it's our way of being able to understand. But we have to keep reminding ourselves that really everything that we attribute to God is God. So that's part of the divine simplicity, is that anything we say of God is God. Anything that we say belongs to God is God. It's not just a part of God. He's got this and he's got that and he's got the other thing as well, and he's also got a backpack. No, it's none of that kind of stuff. He's perfectly simple in the sense that he's not divided in the least bit. So his goodness is his justice, and his existence is his being, and his being is his life, and his love is his justice. It's all one thing, and yet God is not a thing. So we could go on and on. Does God know all things? God knows all things, past, present, and to come, even our most secret thoughts and actions. Okay, so yes, omniscience, all-knowing, that's another attribute of God. Again, you can't be the infinite being if you don't know all things, not only all things that are, but also things that never will be, things that could be but that aren't, and those things are, well, the potential things that have potential to exist, or ideas that have not been actualized in the form of some creation. All that is there in God. In fact, there are prototypes of each one of us in God, versions, if you like, of us that have not been brought into existence, but we here have been brought into existence. So that is quite a thought, that God actually has infinite knowledge of not only everything, but every possible thing as well. Is God holy, just, and merciful? Yes, God is infinitely holy, just, and merciful. Okay, infinitely, yes. So holiness, in a sense, we can say it's God willing himself. It's the love of God for the Godhead, for the infinite good. And that, in a sense, we could say is the Holy Ghost. But we have to be careful as well with what we say, because we can fall into errors. But God is holy. The sacredness of God, the moral goodness of God, the perfection of God, the majesty of God, those kind of things are sort of alternative, if you like, are accompanying adjectives or nouns for holiness of God. Just and merciful, yes. I mean, well, the next question will clarify justice and mercy. It says, why do we call God just? Is the next question. We call God just because he will reward the good and punish the wicked. And that concludes, that's question 11. That's the end of chapter 1. And that last point there was, they're saying, well, we call him just because he will reward the good and punish the wicked. All nice and simple enough. Now, he's just in the sense that every moral good, or moral good itself, is rooted in the very character of God. That's where morality really comes from. Now, you can't just have mercy, you have to have justice as well, but in fact, justice isn't to be thought of as just kind of God taking the stick. It's well, it's something that he owes to himself, and something that he is in himself just. That is not only fair, but it means you could almost say it's all of the virtues together. It's you could say it's holiness as well. The just man, and goodness. Okay, that's. I don't think it mentioned goodness there, but it's desirability, and God is infinitely good, and he can, if he decides to, bend over backwards and do more than he has to do in order to help out creatures, and to save sinners, for instance. And that's how we can look at mercy in God. And again, all these things are one and the same in God. They all are God. So we don't, strictly speaking, have to say that God has a kind of a weighing scale and he says, this part of me wants this and another part of me wants that. It's not quite that simple with the divinity. But those are a few thoughts so far on that chapter, and any comments or further questions will be very welcome. Leave them in the comments below. Please like and subscribe if you're new, and I look forward to seeing you in the next video on this channel. Thank you for watching.